In America, cities usually do not disappear. They shrink. They fade. They lose importance. But Cairo, Illinois did something far more extreme. It entered. Not because of one disaster. Not because of one war. Not because of one mistake. But because history slowly moved around it and then left it behind. Today, Cairo is a city of silence. Boarded windows. Empty streets. Closed schools. Abandoned stores. A population that once numbered in the tens of thousands has fallen to just a few thousand. And the question is impossible to ignore. Why did everyone leave? A city built on a perfect location. Cairo should never have failed. Geographically, it is one of the most strategic locations in the entire United States. It sits at the exact point where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi River. For centuries, this was one of the most important transportation crossroads on the North American continent. Long before highways, long before railroads, long before trucks. This was where trade moved. If you controlled this point, you controlled movement, goods, people, armies, money. Everything passed through here. When Americans began to settle and develop the Midwest in the 19th century, Cairo was an obvious choice for a major city. It was supposed to become the Chicago of the South, or the St. Louis of the East, or something even bigger, the dream of a river empire. In the mid-1800s, investors poured money into Cairo. Engineers tried to tame the rivers. Levees were built. Docks were constructed. Warehouses appeared. Rail lines connected the city to the rest of the country. Steamboats stopped here. Cargo was transferred. Passengers passed through. Cairo became a vital logistical hub. During the Civil War, its importance became even more obvious. The Union Army used Cairo as a major supply and command center. From here, campaigns were launched deep into the south. The city was filled with soldiers, ships, supplies, and activity. For a time, Cairo felt like the center of the world, a boomtown on the water. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Cairo was booming. Its population grew rapidly. Businesses thrived. Hotels, theaters, restaurants, and shops lined the streets. Factories opened. Warehouses expanded. Railroads turned Cairo into a key transfer point between river and land transport. The city became wealthy, confident, ambitious. People believed Cairo's future was guaranteed. After all, rivers do not move. Geography does not change. Or so they thought. A fragile city. But Cairo had a problem that could never be fully solved. It was built in a floodplain, surrounded by water, dependent on levees, protected only by walls of earth and engineering. From the beginning, floods were a constant threat. Major floods struck in 1882, 1912, 1927, and again. Each time, the city survived. Each time, the levees were repaired. Each time, people said the worst was over. But floods left scars, and fear, and cost. The racial divide. Like many American cities, Cairo was deeply segregated. White and black residents lived in different neighborhoods, worked in different jobs, attended different schools, used different services. Tensions were always present beneath the surface. But for a long time, the economy was strong enough to keep the system functioning. That would not last. The first signs of decline. After World War II, America began to change. Highways replaced rivers. Trucks replaced boats. Airports replaced rail hubs. The entire transportation system of the country was reorganized. Cairo's greatest strength, its location on the rivers, became less important. New logistics routes simply went around it. The city did not move, but the world did. Businesses that depended on river traffic began to close or relocate. Rail traffic declined. Warehouses emptied. Jobs disappeared. A city that could not adapt. Some cities found new roles. Cairo did not. It had no major universities, no large industries, no growing suburbs. It was isolated, surrounded by water and farmland, far from major metropolitan centers. As opportunities vanished, people began to leave. First slowly, then faster. The collapse of the downtown. By the 1950s and 1960s, Cairo's downtown began to decay. Shops closed. Hotels emptied. Buildings were abandoned. The tax base shrank. City services declined. Maintenance was delayed. Streets deteriorated. But the city's problems were about to become much worse. The long racial conflict. In the late 1960s, Cairo became the scene of one of the longest and most bitter civil rights conflicts in the Midwest. Black residents demanded equal access to jobs, housing, and public services. White residents resisted. Businesses took sides. Protests began. Then boycotts. Then violence. In 1967, racial tension exploded into open conflict. Buildings were burned. Shots were fired. The National Guard was deployed. For years, Cairo lived under an atmosphere of fear and division. Businesses closed not just because of economic decline, but because they did not want to exist inside a war zone. The white flight. As in many American cities, the reaction was predictable. White residents with money left. They moved to nearby towns or out of the region entirely. They took their tax dollars with them. They took their businesses with them. They took political power with them. Cairo was left poorer, more divided, more fragile. The economic death spiral. With fewer people and fewer businesses, the city's finances collapsed. Schools struggled. Infrastructure decayed. Public services were reduced, which made the city even less attractive, which caused even more people to leave. A classic urban death spiral. The flood of 1937 and its shadow. Decades earlier, the Great Flood of 1937 had nearly destroyed Cairo. Only emergency levee work saved the city. That disaster never left the city's memory. It became part of its identity. Investors remembered. Insurance companies remembered. Businesses remembered. Even when Cairo survived, it was always seen as risky. And in business, risk means higher costs, or no investment at all. A city nobody wanted to bet on. By the 1970s and 1980s, Cairo was no longer seen as a city of opportunity. It was seen as a city of problems. Flood risk, racial tension, economic decline, isolation, every reason not to invest, and very few reasons to try. The population collapse. In 1920, Cairo had more than 15,000 residents. By the early 2000s, that number had fallen to just a few thousand. Today, it is even lower. Entire neighborhoods are empty. Some streets have more abandoned houses than occupied ones. Schools have closed. Hospitals have struggled. The city feels less like a community and more like a memory. The psychological breaking point. At some point, decline becomes normal. Children grow up expecting nothing. Ambition disappears. Leaving becomes the only plan. Those who stay do not plan for the future. They plan for survival. A city that was forgotten. Cairo did not collapse in one dramatic moment. It was not destroyed by a single catastrophe. It was slowly erased by changing transportation routes, economic isolation, racial conflict, flood risk, political neglect, and decades of outmigration. By the time anyone noticed how bad things had become, there was almost no one left to notice. The question that remains: so why did everyone leave Cairo? Was it the rivers, the floods, racism, economics, geography? Or was it something deeper? The Cairo that time forgot. By the early 2000s, Cairo no longer felt like a city. It felt like a leftover place, a place that history had simply passed around. Entire blocks were empty. Storefronts were boarded. Schools closed one by one. The hospital struggled to survive. The downtown, once filled with hotels and theaters, became a corridor of silence. There were streets where you could walk for 10 minutes and not see another person. Not because it was late at night, but because almost no one lived there anymore. A city cut off from the world. Cairo's geography, once its greatest strength, had become a trap. The city sits at the southern tip of Illinois, surrounded by rivers on two sides and rural land on the others. There are no large cities nearby.
No suburbs.
No commuter economy. If you live in Cairo, you are not near anywhere important. This isolation makes everything harder. Attracting businesses, attracting doctors, attracting teachers, attracting investment, even attracting basic services. For young people, this isolation feels like a wall. If you want a future, you have to leave. The last employers. By the 21st century, Cairo had only a handful of significant employers left. Some government jobs, some small factories, some healthcare services, some schools, and not much else. When even one of these institutions struggled or closed, the impact was enormous. There was no backup economy, no second option, no safety net. The housing collapse. As people left, houses became worthless. In some parts of Cairo, homes could be bought for a few $1,000s, sometimes for a few hundred. Sometimes they were simply abandoned. With no buyers and no renters, landlords stopped maintaining properties. Roofs collapsed. Walls rotted. Entire blocks turned into ruins. Not dramatic ruins, just slow, ugly decay. A city of elderly residents. Those who stayed were often the ones who could not leave. The elderly, the poor, people without the money, health, or connections to start over somewhere else. This changed the entire character of the city. Schools lost students. Churches lost congregations. Clubs and organizations disappeared. A city cannot survive when its young people leave and never come back. The failed revival attempts. Over the years, many plans were proposed to save Cairo. Tourism based on Civil War history, riverfront redevelopment, historic preservation projects, small business grants. But none of these efforts could overcome the fundamental problem. There was no economic engine, no reason for large numbers of people or businesses to return. Small projects created small improvements, but they could not reverse a century of decline. The levee that divides the city. One of the most symbolic features of Cairo today is its massive levee system. Built to protect the city from floods, it also blocks the view of the rivers. In some places, the city feels like it is hiding from the water that once gave it life. Protected, but also cut off. Like a fortress with nothing left inside worth defending. The schools that closed. As the population fell, schools were merged and closed. Class sizes shrank. Programs were cut. Eventually, entire school buildings were abandoned. For a community, this is a psychological death blow. When schools close, families stop believing in the future. Crime and desperation. Poverty always brings stress. Stress brings conflict. In a city with few opportunities and little hope, crime becomes more visible. Not because people are worse, but because life is harder. Policing in such a small, poor, isolated city is difficult. Resources are limited. Morale is low. Every problem feels larger than it should. The national indifference. Perhaps the most painful part of Cairo's story is how invisible it is. There was no national scandal.
No dramatic disaster.
No moment that forced the country to look. Cairo simply faded. And no one noticed. Or cared enough to stop it. The last residents. Today, only a few thousand people remain. Some stay because this is home. Some because they have nowhere else to go. Some because they still believe Cairo can survive. They live surrounded by empty buildings and memories of a city that no longer exists. Can Cairo be saved? This is a difficult question. Technically, yes. Any place can be saved with enough money, people, and political will. But in reality, cities compete. And Cairo has very little to offer that other places do not offer more easily. Better connected, better funded, better positioned. The brutal truth. Cairo's decline is not a mystery. It is the logical result of losing its economic role, losing its transportation importance, being isolated, being divided, being forgotten. Cities exist for a reason. When that reason disappears, the city must change, or it will slowly die. Cairo never found a new reason. A pattern repeated across America. Cairo is not unique. There are dozens of towns and small cities across the United States facing the same fate. Former railroad hubs, former mining towns, former factory cities, all built for a purpose that no longer exists, all slowly emptying. The difference between collapse and erasure. Some cities collapse in dramatic ways. Others are erased quietly. Cairo belongs to the second category.
No explosión. No headland.
Just a long, slow disappearance. What Cairo really teaches. Cairo teaches us that geography is not destiny. That infrastructure changes. That trade routes move. That economies evolve. And that when a city fails to adapt, history does not wait. It moves on. The emotional cost. For those who grew up in Cairo, the loss is personal. They remember full schools, busy streets, crowded stores. They remember a city that felt alive. Now they return and see something else. Not ruins, but absence. The final question. So why did everyone leave Cairo, Illinois? Because the world it was built for disappeared. And nothing replaced it. Closing reflection. Cairo was once one of the most important points on the map of America. Today, it is barely noticed. Not because it failed in one dramatic moment, but because it was slowly, quietly left behind. The last line. Cities do not always die in flames. Some die in silence. Cairo is one of them.